This tutorial will talk about how to restore a photo. So we have here a photo, it's been ripped up, it's got a lot of tears and scratches, it's in sepia, which is great, actually we'll probably keep that, but also the name, we're going to see if we can maybe take the names out of this, even though the names are pretty cool too. Now the first step is that right now all of these corners are the same image. So we need to remove them from this base background image and place them on their own layers so that we can rearrange them and put them back together. So the first part of this is I am going to use the quick selection tool, which is our fourth tool. The quick selection tool is a brush, so it can be made bigger or smaller by pushing the left brackets or the right brackets. And when I hold down the mouse, it's going to try to find the edge for me. So I usually start in the center and I kind of move around in a spiral shape out. Now in this case, it also got some of this background stuff, and so if I ever want to remove some selection, I can hold down the Alt key, which changes the quick selection tool to a minus, and then I can come back around and I just want this first corner. And I want to make sure that it does get all of this side stuff. I don't know what I'm going to need and what I don't need. And now I can remove this. Now if I press Control C, it'll copy it but keep the original data on this background layer, but if I press Control X to cut, it will remove it. And the background layer can't actually have any transparency, so it'll replace it with whatever color is your current background color, the one in the back. In my case it's white. I've cut it. Now I can press Control V to paste it. And now that it's pasted on its own layer, which you can see over here in layer 1, I can pick this up and move it wherever I need it to go. And I'm going to name this, because layer 1 isn't very descriptive, I will change this by double clicking on it to top left. Now I can do the same thing again. Now a problem that comes up in a lot of cases is this. So I get out my quick selection tool and I start with this top right hand corner and it doesn't seem to be picking up anything, and then it takes a big chunk like that. Why is that? Why did it do that? The reason is that the quick selection tool works on what layer I'm currently selected on. And in this case, I'm selected on the top left layer. If I look at the top left layer by itself, this is what it looks like. And it just selected all of the transparent areas. So I need to make sure that I always click back onto the layer I want to be taking stuff from before I do a selection. Now I'll press Control D to deselect to get rid of any selections. When in doubt, when you have an issue in Photoshop, that will usually solve it. And now I will go through again, and I'll do the same thing for this one, and I can make my brush smaller so that I have more detail and get that corner. Maybe this too. It's better to get too much than not enough, I think. Press Control X to cut it, Control V to paste it, and every time I paste it automatically comes onto its own layer. I'll call that top right. Go back to my background, and once again, and I'll hold down Alt to remove it, to take away if it goes too far. Sometimes it does. It does a pretty good job of finding edges, but not always perfect. Now I've got that bottom right hand corner selected. Control X to cut, Control V to paste. It pastes onto its own layer, which I'll now call bottom right. And then we just have one image left on the background layer. It's this one. Now I can use my quick select to get this. Make sure I've got it all, cut and paste. And I'll call that one bottom left. Now I'll hold down my mouse and drag off all of the eyes. So you can see this background layer now has nothing of use on it. I've cut everything out of it and pasted it back into its own layer, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw away this background layer. I can pick it up and drag it to the trash or click on the trash and say yes, because I don't need those. And then I'll turn the eyeball back on to make those layers visible. Now my next step is putting these together. Now in a lot of cases, like with this one, it feels like maybe this one could be rotated a little bit. Control T will allow me to transform this, and I can rotate it by going past any of the corners until my mouse becomes this rotation tool, and I can do that. And once I'm okay with the transformation, I have to hit Enter to okay it. Now in this case, my issue is it looked like this was torn kind of at an angle. that I actually need this one to be underneath the bottom left edge. And I can do that by dragging to different layers. So I'll take this top left layer, and if I drag it below the bottom left layer, this is actually the order in which I'm looking at these. Starting at the top, this is the top one, and then it goes down all the way to the bottom one. So now that this is underneath, I can drag that to where it is. Now if I want to be more precise, I can also use my arrow keys. My arrow keys will give me 1 pixel precision. If I hold down Shift in the arrow keys, it's a little bit more. I don't know what that is, maybe 10. And I can transform it again until it's about right. With this top right one, I'll do the same thing again. Go ahead and drag that one underneath too. I think that one should be under. And I think there's a part of this that has kind of disappeared. It doesn't quite match up the way you think it would. I think that's because part of the image is gone, which we'll be able to fix, but just be aware of that if it doesn't quite line up the way you're expecting, I can't quite get it either. Maybe something like that. Now I have my 4 pieces kind of put back together. Now I can heal those scars using 2 tools. I can use my Band-Aid, which is the spot healing brush tool, and I can also, well, we'll start with that. Now the spot healing brush tool by default does not do all layers. It only affects the layer that you're currently on, but we need to heal between 2 different layers. Like up here, I'd like to be able to drag over this and heal, but it needs to be able to see both of those. Now there's 2 ways to solve this. One is to just choose sample all layers, and then it'll look at all of them, which is probably a better decision because I don't like merging layers. It takes away some options from you later, but I can also merge these layers. Right now they're 4 separate things, and I can un-eyeball any of them to show that, but now I can put them back together. And the way I can do that is if I hold down Control, I can select all of these layers, and then I can merge them. Control E is the quick key to merge them, but you can also click on these 3 lines, and it looks like it's off my screen now, but you'll see close to the bottom, merge layers. So I'm going to go ahead and just press Control E, and now they are all 1 layer, which means I should be able to use the spot healing brush, and I make it just a little bit bigger than the thing I'm trying to heal, and do that. Now the problem with the spot healing brush is it doesn't work great with more detail. As you can see there, if I try to do, the hair's not too bad because there's a lot of randomness with it, but in the case of where it's going across faces or hands, I'm probably going to have to do that more by hand. But the spot healing brush can work pretty quickly to solve or to heal a lot of these issues that have come up because of the tears. So I'm going to go ahead and use the spot healing brush as much as I think is possible. Notice that I'm avoiding faces because, well, I'll show you. I'll just go across her face here with the spot healing brush. It's not magic. The Photoshop's really good at trying to figure out what should go there to fix it. It's a content-aware brush, but in a lot of cases you're either going to have to get in really close with a lot of detail, or, which is more likely, use the clone stamp tool to kind of solve it yourself. So I'm going to go through here and make sure I've gotten most of those. Probably, yeah, I don't want to solve that one. So now let's go through and use the spot healing, or the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool is S. The way that we use the clone stamp tool is it is a brush, which means I can make it bigger or smaller by using the left and right brackets. And I have to start by choosing the area I want to clone from by holding down the Alt key. So because it's her chin, it's probably skin color that's pretty similar to this. Oops, I'm still in this clone stamp. There we go. So I will hold down the Alt key. I'm going to make my brush really small, and then that plus sign that appears is where it is pulling it from. And as long as I don't Alt click again, the distance from where I'm drawing, which is the circle, and where I'm taking the color from, which is the plus sign, stays the same. And this just gives me more control over what it's going to be replacing. It's kind of a content-aware fill where I'm the one that has to be aware. But generally it's more accurate for you to do it yourself than for Photoshop to guess. And in a lot of cases, it's always going to be slower for you to do it yourself, but in a lot of cases you're not going to get good results just relying on Photoshop's default things. But if you're running out of time, if you got to get it done fast, then sometimes you don't have much of a choice. But I can go through here, and it's nice that it's not an especially high-res scan of this, which will hide some of the mistakes I'm making. If this was a really high-resolution image, it might be a little harder to do this. With this person, who I think looks a lot like one of the Doctors Who, it's a little tougher. You're missing a lot of detail on the hand here, and so it's kind of just do your best. I can even use the clone stamp tool, and notice that, by the way, I am constantly holding down the Alt key and choosing a new place to take this from. So you can see here, I can see the line where it goes from dark to light. For this light side, I pulled from over here. For this dark side, I'll have to hold down Alt again and choose a new selection. By choosing new areas to clone from all the time, I avoid the thing that makes it really obvious that you've clone stamped, and that is repeating patterns. You see textures repeated. That's something that makes it really easy to tell, oh, this has been photoshopped. But by holding down Alt, I don't go for more than a few seconds at a time taking from the same area. But by taking from different locations, I can avoid the look of a clone stamp tool. And if I had all day, I could make it look really good, but you also have some time limitations too. You can see there, we're starting to get some pretty decent correction on some of this. And I can zoom in. Don't be afraid to zoom in. The easiest way for me to zoom in is holding down Alt and the middle mouse wheel. I really like that method because it's fast. My finger is already on the mouse and on the keyboard, and so I'm ready to go there. I don't have to switch tools or anything. In a lot of cases, you're just inventing. I mean, you always are, but you're just trying to guess what was there where the scratch or the tear took out the picture. And so you get to decide, as being an artist, you have to figure out what was there to the best of your ability and try to cover up the fact that that was torn. So now I have a much closer to the original version of this. There's a couple, not thrilled with the way her chin went. Notice I'm also holding Control and pressing Control Z often when I make a mistake, or if I'm not happy with something. Control Z will take me one step back. Control Shift Z will take me back more than one. Photoshop's a little different than Word in that regard, where Control Z just undoes and redoes the last one thing over and over again. The last thing I could do, I could come in here and even remove the names using the clone stamp tool, or maybe even the spot healing brush. I kind of like that the names are there. That's kind of a cool historical artifact. Just depends on what your client wants. I mean, you still have the original. So I could just carefully remove this, which I'm sure is just riveting YouTube video. But I'm constantly choosing from different areas. When I need to be more precise, I make that brush smaller. Also, a nice thing to have when you're doing clone stamps is to make sure your brush hardness is at 0 or a really low number, so that it's feathered at the edge. It's not a sharp edge, because it's really obvious if I do this. I'll turn the hardness up to 100, and you can probably see in a lot of cases. If I did that, then you can see almost the circle that appears when you do that. So I usually set my hardness to really low or 0 when I'm doing this, because then it just fades at itself and it blends better with what I've got. So if you want an extra challenge, you can try to remove the names. It's not necessary. Once again, I think it's kind of cool that this old picture has autographs of the people in it, but I can clone stamp if I'm careful. Remove pretty much everything. So you're getting that. If I go back into my history, so we can remember what it was like, if I scroll back up to the history, that's what it looked like originally, and now it looks like that. I could even do like a levels, Control L, and kind of auto do the levels to increase the contrast between those. And I get something that looks a lot like a picture that wasn't in terrible shape.